Yo, what up guys? In this video we're going to talk to you about how to color grade red footage, specifically how I color graded my red weapon footage on my Japan video that I released on YouTube. I had a few of you asking me how I got that dramatic orange and teal look in that video, so I'm going to show you exactly what I did in this color grading process. So let's go ahead and jump in here to one of my favorite clips as far as color grading goes. Here is the before and after. So as you can see, quite the difference, and having red footage that is raw like this allows you so much more flexibility in post than your regular DSLR footage. First thing I want you to notice though over here is the Lumetri scopes. Again, I'm always paying attention to those to make sure that I'm using as much dynamic range as I can. You see that before the image was color corrected, most of the information was on the lower side here, so most of it looks a little bit underexposed. None of it's touching zero, which means there aren't any lost details in the shadows, and there aren't any details that are above 100, which means I haven't lost any detail in the highlights. But the goal here is to try and get that information spread out more evenly and more towards the middle of the image so that it's a better exposure and that we're utilizing more of the dynamic range that this camera has. So when you see that I've color corrected it, we've brought up a lot of these highlights from, you know, the 60-50 mark up to the 90-80 mark, while still keeping our shadows close to zero without hitting zero. Now there is a few parts that are hitting zero, like right in here there's some blackness that I've lost the detail in there, and I'm personally okay, especially when I'm trying to go for a very dramatic look like this, I'm okay crushing some shadows and some highlights when, you know, clearly this isn't the focus of my image up here in these highlights. And so you see I've clipped some of those highlights in there, and then some of these shadows inside here, over here, we've lost a little bit of detail in there. But that's kind of part of getting that super dramatic look, and you know, that just comes down to personal preference. Do you want to crush some of those shadows and overblow some of those highlights to give it a more dramatic look, or are you trying to keep it flatter? So for this video specifically, I was okay, you know, going a little bit overboard on the color grade to give it a super dramatic look. So let's go ahead and dive in and look at what I did exactly to this image. Now you notice I have two adjustment layers. I've color graded on both these adjustment layers, and I didn't touch the actual file itself here. Sometimes I'll color grade using adjustment layers, mostly when I'm experimenting and not wanting to apply it directly to the footage yet, because I'm wanting to experiment and try out different color grades. So I've done two layers here, and you'll see that they're actually the exact same color grade, and I've just applied it twice to make it super dramatic and super intense. And I actually did this on accident at the beginning. I duplicated this layer and saw that it was super dramatic, but I was like, you know what, I actually kind of like how dramatic it is and overdone that color grade is, and so I just color graded the entire video that way by duplicating that color grade. So yes, it was by accident. Originally this was my initial grade. I probably would have kept going a little bit on it, but instead I accidentally duplicated it and it looked like that, and I said, you know what, that looks pretty sweet. Again, a little too dramatic, but we'll go with it, and it turned out people really liked it. So let's look at just the first layer. Again, let's start with Creative tab. I'm gonna go ahead and undo these guys here. So we'll check this on and off. In the Creative tab, what we've done is we've applied the LUT Osiris M31 log. You can get this for free at Color Grade Central. And I have the intensity set to 38%. I brought down the vibrance and the saturation just a tad. But because I ended up doubling that, what you really are looking at is about 75% is what it ended up being at intensity-wise. So just look at all these numbers and realize that I've duplicated all of this. So just kind of double everything we've done here. So that's the before and after for the Creative tab. Again, the M31 LUT is a great orange and teal look. Next, moving into the curves. Here's the before and after and what I've done to my curve. Again, as you guys know, I like to bring up those highlights, keep those shadows down a little bit, creating an S curve, which gives us that pop and that contrast. Now look at my Lumetri scopes again over here. We go from kind of a flat image to bringing those highlights up, almost touching 100, and bringing those shadows almost down to be touching 0. So again, I'm stretching that image out to utilize as much of that dynamic range as I can. And then moving into basic correction, here's before and after our basic correction. You see I've brought in just a little bit of tint, and that's pretty much all I've done to the image here. Now you take that exact same thing with this second layer. Nothing has been changed. Again, it's just a duplicate on the second layer. If I pop that on, boom, you see a very dramatic look here. And if you look at our Lumetri scopes here, we've just stretched that out a ton, and now we're pushing the highlights up here past their limit, pushing some of the shadows down here past their limit, and just creating a very crushed, contrasty look. So again, this is probably the most compliments I've gotten on a color grade, is this one where it was very over the top and dramatic. And that's kind of what you're seeing trending on YouTube right now, is guys like Sam Kolder and, you know, that type of travel video style. They're crushing their blacks, and they're, you know, just making everything super contrasty and almost over the top. But that's kind of what's selling right now on YouTube. I kind of like somewhere in between. I kind of go a little bit over top than most filmmakers would go, but not quite as far as some of those travel filmmakers go. But again, because we have the Red Weapon shooting this footage, it gives us so much flexibility in post to really tweak those. So there you have it. That is how I color graded the Japan footage. Again, shot by shot, it would vary. I do different things in different shots. With this one right here, you see that we played with the temperature and tint a little bit differently, brought up our shadows a little bit because it was a little bit too crushed for me. Creative tab looked the same, the curves looked about the same. So throughout the whole edit, that color grade is kind of what I did to achieve that look with this Japan edit. So that's it, guys. If you have any further questions about how I color graded this red footage for this Japan video, please let me know.